Let's get let's get started with an icebreaker. In the chat, please share a hidden gem or favorite place in Oregon that you would encourage others to check out this year. I'll start. I've been thinking about this. One of my favorite spots in Oregon is going to Rockaway on the coast and riding on the scenic train to Garibaldi. So that's mine, and would love to hear what other folks think. You can put your name, role, and favorite hidden gem in the chat. Hannah J's for fish and chips in Lincoln City. Laura's like, no, I don't want to share my favorite spot. Kate, Sisters Bakery and Sisters. Oh, that sounds great. I've never been there. Begonia, Eagle Creek. That's a good one. Brenda, Painted Hills and Fossil Beds. Peter Buckley says 4th of July parade in Yachats. Oh, that sounds great. I love parades. Dana, Shellberg Falls. It was better before the fires, but still wonderful. Dana, where is that?
It's pretty close to Mill City out in the Santiam Canyon.
Okay, great. Rod, Wallowa Lake in Wallowa County. Yes, that is beautiful. See a couple more. Aaron, Eagle Cap Wilderness. And let's see, Renee, the Falls of the North Umpqua River. Yes. Oh, let me do Shira. There's a quiet private waterfall in Skamania County that nobody knows about, and I'm not sharing. Oh, I'm so jealous. And Athena, Creswell Bakery, or Clear Lake near Mount Hood. This is great. I'm going to capture all of these, and I've got my little getaway set for this year. Thanks, everybody. Let's see. We have Dorothy Spence getting us started today with an update on ERDC, including the Pulse survey results. So Dorothy, I'll just hand it over to you now.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's so good to see all of you. Always makes me happy to see so many friendly faces that I used to see way more often than I do these days. Also, just real quick, special shout out to Shira and Danny. I had a chance in November and December to go to parent groups and hear from parents in those communities, and it was incredibly powerful. And your guys' parents, top notch. They did not hold back. It was really awesome to be part of that experience. And Danny, I have to tell you, the starting off with games, loved that that experience. It was really fun to be part of that with everyone. So thank you. So let's see. Let me bring up my presentation. Okay. So I wanted to start off with just a really quick update on where our caseload is for ERDC. As of December, we are at 16,136 families who are approved for your ERDC. This is a continued slight decline. I think it's about 20 some families less than our caseload last month. It's been on this kind of very slow trend downwards the last 5 months or so. But again, small numbers, we're talking 20 families. Of those, 12,169 are connected to providers actively using their benefit, and 3,967 are not yet connected to a provider. They're approved for ERDC, but not yet connected to a provider and using their benefits. And it's that population that we focused on for the Pulse survey that was done. And that is the primary objective of coming to you all and sharing what came out of that survey and then our next steps with addressing the needs for supporting those families and learning more about them. So as a reminder, the Pulse survey was administered from October 24th through the end of November. We surveyed 3,761 families. These were families that were eligible, meaning they'd been approved for ERDC, but weren't connected to a provider that either accepted their benefit or weren't connected to a provider at all. And the end, we had an email for them because the survey was administered by email. And we did some reminder emails during that time period as well. We asked questions related to their use of childcare, their desired use, and then challenges that they were facing. We had a pretty low response rate. We had 4% of the folks that we asked responded. We kind of anticipated having a low response rate given that it was sent by email and there wasn't an incentive to complete it. And we recognized that this was going to be a first kind of first go at gathering this information, and we would need to continue efforts and next steps beyond this. As you all are more than familiar with, because I know that I was familiar with it when I was a hub director, the responses really demonstrated that families have unique needs and situations, and their individual contexts of what's going on for their families, the ages of their children, where they live in the state, all of that really matters for the kinds of barriers that they may be facing to finding a provider that meets their needs and accepts ERDC. There was definitely a subset of families who needed care and are not connected to any provider at all. And as you'll see in the next slide, we also had families who were connected to a provider, just that provider did not accept ERDC. And so some of the top barriers that did come out of this survey is finding the type of care desired with providers with schedules that worked for families, that had availability and was easy to get to. So in terms of the families that did respond, there was a group of families who were actually using care. So they were in care settings of some sort. And a portion of them weren't looking for additional care. They were fine with what they had available to them. And then there were others that did need additional new or additional care. And then there is a chunk of families, a larger chunk of families who were not using any care. And out of those, the majority of them needed care. In terms of the challenges that were faced while looking for care, again, these aren't going to be new to any of us. I think here we probably hear these pretty regularly from families, and I know it came up in conversations with the parents from Four Rivers and Clackamas. Finding the type of childcare setting that you want. So just because something's available doesn't necessarily mean that a family feels like that's going to be the best setting for their child. Finding a provider who can offer the schedule that they need, provider that has open slots and availability, and finding a provider in a location that's easiest for them to get to. These were the top 4 barriers that came up. We allowed families to select as many barriers as they wanted. They didn't have to choose one, and they could choose as many as they needed, but these were the top 4 that came up. We also allowed families to give us kind of whatever additional information they wanted to provide about their experience of trying to find care, and just wanted to share quotes that really resonated with these particular barriers. The first family said they had finding availability close by was the hardest for them. There was a lot of wait list, and they don't take kids over the age of 6 and 7. There weren't enough after-school ERDC eligible openings, and it doesn't help when there are sporadic needs such as evening or weekend childcare when there were 0 providers. And so we recognize that one, this is a small group of families, 124, 145, might be reversing those numbers, but it was a small set of the families that of the whole universe of unconnected families. And we know that there's information that we gathered, there's more information we need to gather, and there are things that we can be doing right now to support families. So the first set is, what can we do to better support those families now that we don't have to wait for some big system solution? What can we try now with the system partners that we have and can leverage? So we know 211 has a whole childcare specialist supports, and it's really designed for families to do that first outreach to 211, right? The parents have to do the calling in. And so what we're doing is we're going to be partnering with 211 childcare specialists to do a more active outreach strategy. So starting this month, families who are approved for ERDC but not connected to a provider are going to get a text message that gives them the opportunity to say, hey, would you like to have your information shared with 211 so they can call you? And it's just an opt-in. Yes, yep, I want them to call me. I do want that direct outreach. And those names will, that information gets shared with 211, and then 211 can do that outreach and follow-up referral support. We also are going to be leveraging our family coaches through the Department of Human Services. They work directly with TANF families, and TANF families make up about 75% of our unconnected population. And so they likely have unique needs to their situations. And so family coaches are going to be supplied with the names of the families that they're working with that are ERDC approved and not connected, to reach out to them and gather better information on what's going on for them. What might be the specific barriers for TANF families that we need to be addressing? And also ask, hey, do you want 211 to reach out to you? Have you talked to them yet? So that we can continue to also feed names into 211 childcare specialists to do some direct outreach. Another thing that came up both in this Pulse survey, but I also heard it in both the family groups that I went to for Four Rivers and Clackamas, is that our family friend and neighbor care process for getting approved through ERDC is intimidating. It's not necessarily the smoothest process. So if you are someone who's like, well, I would prefer to have my neighbor or my family member take care of my child, the process of getting approved to do that can be overwhelming. And so we're looking for improvement opportunities for that particular process so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. And that can be an avenue for those family members and friends that can do that for ERDC families. And then we also recognize that the data that 211 uses to do referrals is only as good as the database itself. And so we have worked with Find Childcare Oregon and our CCR&R partners within DELP to identify what are some improvements we could be making right now within that database that could help improve it. One is better data that goes in on ERDC. So rather than the monthly data updates that are happening right now, we have updated it so that it's daily information that's submitted into Find Childcare Oregon and improving that data transfer. The second is Find Childcare Oregon is updating their search capabilities so that it's easier to find ERDC listed programs. Right now, if you guys go on there, the ERDC little button is like hidden within the search filters. So we're making it more visible for it to be selected. And then the last is having a logo. Right now, the logos that you see most often are the Spark ones on programs that come up. So we're having a similar logo created that designates when a program is ERDC listed. So for that would be for easier identification. I know there's lots of questions or comments maybe in the chat, so I'll get to that in 1 second.
Okay.
Because the last thing I just wanted to share before I stop screen sharing so I can answer your questions and see all your faces is that we also just recently updated our ERDC provider guide. The provider guide gets mailed to all providers as well as CCR&Rs. And we have it available online for everyone else. And I can pop that in the chat for folks. This will be the provider guide through 2025. And starting the first quarter of this year, we'll also be working on kind of what the next iteration of provider guide updates need to be for 2026. All right, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see questions.
Dorothy, I'll summarize. It was, there were some questions around numbers of ERDC approved and accepting providers in the chat. So I gave them the ERDC dashboard. But then there were questions around clarification of if there's a possibility to get breakdown of types of programs that are accepting ERDC, because currently that's not available on the dashboard.
So by county or just like statewide, how many types of programs accept ERDC?
I think it's both by county as well as statewide breakdown of type of program.
Yep, I can get that information from our data analyst I'll have to ask if we have it by county or mapped by county, but I know that we do have a chart that shows like different provider types and the number in the state that accept ERDC. And I can get that follow-up to Nancy to share out with folks. Hi, Begonia. You never have questions. Just
Yes.
flash your hands up.
I do. So thank you, Dorothy, and congratulations for your appointment. And so I have a question about the daily reporting. So on my mind, when you have such an ambiguous language, it could look like two ways, that the ERDC staffing are only updating this thing based on the number of providers, or that the providers are actually updating the data connected to the child that they serve daily. So if it's number two, that will be a really great opportunity to measure attendance.
It's not number two. So it's number one, which is when new providers come into the system or they decide they no longer want to accept ERDC for some reason, they become unlisted. It's that master kind of information of who are the providers that accept ERDC, and that information is being shared daily to Find Childcare Oregon.
Right.
The second piece of it in terms of provider information being up to date, so what the providers have the power to put into Find Childcare Oregon, that information, and Hannah, I might ask you to make sure I'm not misstating anything here. They get from Find Childcare Oregon, they send out like a monthly, it's like all I can see is PIF. I know it's that represents something. I'm like, what does that acronym mean?
Provider information form. So it's an
Thank you.
online connection to the database.
Yep. So there's some reminders that come from Find Childcare Oregon to providers. That's like, hey, has anything changed in your program? Here's your update. And then CCR&Rs are also responsible for making sure that providers are like updating their information in Find Childcare Oregon.
Right, but that wouldn't solve the issue that you highlighted, or parents highlighted, that it is, okay, we know that the providers are available, but when you make the phone call, actually, they might be full, right? And so this is the step one, is the idea of having a 2.0 in the future to solve this issue, and at the same time, without posing a burden for providers, especially in-home providers?
Yeah. Well, I think that you bring up a really great point of at a state level, in order to have the kind of information that you're talking about, there would be a requirement on providers, right? Like the people who hold that enrollment information and the changes are those providers. So I think that, I think that we're always discussing what are the opportunities to have the most up-to-date data on what providers have available or capacity for. And that really relies on this interconnected system of CCR&Rs, providers, Find Childcare Oregon, right? And it's a fine balance. Other questions? There's so many of them.
Dorothy, do you see Brenda's question about the ERDC guide?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So are you talking printed, or is the online version like emailed? Would that be okay, Brenda? Okay. And the number of providers by type. And Jillian, you're just talking about ERDC providers. I think that was the question we had asked before. Okay. Let's see, one system communicate in multiple languages. Yes. So there's translations that go on within the one system. So the text message goes out based on what the preferred language is that the person selected within the one system. Okay. Did I miss questions? Y'all can just unmute as well and, say anything to me. Well, not anything, questions related to the content I provided.
Hannah, did you have a question? I thought I saw your hand up. No, okay.
Okay. Thanks, Nancy. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dorothy. This was great information. Oh, I see that Jillian just popped a question in. Are we getting any closer to hubs accessing the one system?
That's a great question. I guess the direct answer is not really at the moment. There are a number of barriers with that. That's not just the folks that do have access to the one system are not happy with the level of access they have. And so one of the issues that they're trying to solve for any community partners that do have access, how do you ensure you have the right level of access? And those access levels are built like in behind the system. It takes a big change request. And I'm sure this is the mantra you guys have all heard about the one system, which is there are a lot more requests for changes on the system than they have the capacity to build in any sort of reasonable time frame. So that's where we are continuing to be with that piece. Thanks, Jillian.
Thanks, Dorothy. I really appreciate your time.
Of course.
Okay, next we have Chair Miller providing a council update and introductions, and will lead a discussion along with Marie Simons and Peter Buckley. So I'll hand it over to you, Chair Miller.
Okay, thank you. And congratulations, Dorothy. Exciting to hear about your new position. Many of us have worked with Dorothy for years, maybe a decade or so. So it's nice to have someone whom we all know coming into that position. I want to start by thanking all of you hub directors for giving us council members some time on your agenda today. We'll see how this goes, if it seems like a valuable use of your time as we look ahead to future hub agendas. And I'm going to ask my fellow council members, Peter and Marie, will you introduce yourselves in case all the hub directors don't know you?
Certainly be glad to. Peter Buckley, I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of the council and I work with Southern Oregon Success, which is a community initiative in Jackson and Josephine counties in support of children and families.
Thanks, Peter. And Marie.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Marie Simons. I also serve on the Early Learning Council. My day job is that I am the executive director of the Bandon Dunes Charitable Foundation, and I've had the pleasure to work with, I can at least see Brenda's name. She and I served together on the 2020 Task Force for Quality and Affordable Childcare. So I'm really glad to be here today.
Awesome, thanks. So we all understand very well how busy 2025 is going to be for each of you. Not that the earlier years weren't busy also, but we know with all of the work you're doing with Build on roles, responsibilities, backbones, new rules coming up, which I know we'll hear about a little bit later this afternoon, grant agreements with DELC. So we know you have pretty full plates already. And what we would like to do today is to explore with you and hear your comments about the priorities that the council has set when we had our retreat last fall for 2025. And thank you, Nancy, for sending those out just a little earlier today. So the priorities that we've set are listed in one of those documents, and then the other document lists the schedule for our council meetings this year and which topic will be discussed at which one of those meetings. So what we thought we would do, so we want your input on those documents, especially the priorities. But we also, I want to let you know that the council is going to be playing a very active role in advocating at the legislature this year. We've done it sporadically in past legislative sessions, but this year we're going to be taking that responsibility and that role very seriously. We're going to be meeting virtually, but also have hybrid meetings every other meeting. So starting in February, some of us will be in Salem. Others who can't travel will be online, but in order to have time to actually meet with legislators and play that advocate role. So we're excited about that. We know that many of you, perhaps all of you, also are building relationships with your local legislators. So I'm hoping that with Gabby's help, we can, and Nancy and Maria, we can find ways to really combine our efforts in that advocacy realm. So exciting part of the upcoming legislative session. So what we thought we would do today is to break into 3 subgroups just for about 10 or 12 minutes so that each of us council members can be in one of those groups and then can listen to your comments about our priorities, get your input, your feedback. You know, we're looking for ways that the council can support your work and that we can really partner even more intentionally with you all than has happened in the past. So we're here, I think, largely to listen. And then once we have those breakout groups, which I think Gabby has set up, I understand. Thank you, Gabby. Then we'll come back and share what we've heard in each of those groups and sort of decide then where do we go from here. So with that introduction, Peter and Marie, do you want to add anything to those comments? Okay, so Gabby, why don't you do your math?
It looks like all the groups are back. Welcome. I hope you had a good conversation. I know group 1 had a very robust conversation with Peter. Why don't we provide some feedback, some summaries of what you heard? Council members, if you want to start that, and your note takers can provide any additional support. Looks like people are still coming back, so I think I'm just going to wait a minute. Okay. Sue, does that sound right? We'll just have the council members share a summary of what they heard.
All right. Wow, that went fast. Welcome back, everyone. Hi, Chris. Good to see you. We talked about you in our session, but we'll let you talk about yourself in a minute. Okay, so council members, how about if we share out what we heard in our breakout rooms? Peter and Marie.
Marie, you're welcome to go first if you'd like. All right, I'll jump in. So, yeah, good feedback from the group. Just start off kind of going down to the bottom of the document around tracking progress. The point was made about numbers 3 and 4 when we talk about highlight state agencies collaborations. I think there's some hope that's not just highlighting agencies collaborations, but making sure the agencies are co-accountable for collaborating, making sure that it's a priority for the Early Learning Council that agencies are collaborating and that we're doing everything we can to ensure that collaboration. And I do like that phrase, co-accountable, that we're holding each other co-accountable for the collaborations. And it was mentioned that could be actually everywhere we talk about working with state agencies and each other, that sort of co-accountability should be woven through. There was a comment made that when we mentioned the literacy program, we have it down, I think it's number 4 under education, childcare, and early learning. And there was a comment, the hubs, this is a strong priority for the hubs, is the governor's early learning initiative. Comment was made about, in addition to highlighting things that are happening, for instance, under behavioral health, we have highlight behavioral health partnerships for prenatal to age 5. Item number 3 there. The comment was brought up that we also need to highlight, if we can, if we find information, what's working in like private childcare facilities. We'll most likely be able to get some information from Head Starts or from Boys and Girls Clubs, the larger entities, but is there a way that we can find out what's happening in behavioral health for, private childcare. And also not just highlight the partnerships, but also we need to look for places where we still have gaps and need to be able to fill. There was the discussion about we need to be intentional on connecting in the behavioral health sector. How do we make sure we're intentionally connecting the work that's happening around the social emotional metric for 0 to 5 with the early child suspension expulsion program? And the question was brought up, where's the pyramid model? We didn't list the pyramid model or call out the pyramid model in our priorities. And that was suggesting that we should do that. And even more importantly, the question came up, where are the CCRRs in our priorities? And we did not include mention of it. And I think that's a mistake that we made with Raise Up Oregon 2.0. We didn't focus enough. So a strong recommendation that we have to highlight that is a priority for us to work with CCRRs, hubs, pyramid model, etc. And I'm open for anybody who wants to correct or add anything if I'm not reaching anything. Let's see here. We talked a lot on the data side again about the dashboard idea. I know this has been discussed for a long time, but while it's great, the feeling was it's great that we have that priority to be able to track progress. We need to have it kind of be able to tell the complete picture. The example is given of Preschool Promise. We can count how many kids have access to Preschool Promise, but we can't talk about, we don't have the data that shows by providing access, these were the outcomes these families experienced, etc. So we need to be able to get enough of data around the work that's being done in the entire early childhood system. Sue, I don't know if you remember, Subin at the retreat was talking about, he just really wished we had a way to visualize the entire early childhood system so we can see how is this working together, and then what outcomes are we getting from the different parts of the system. So, there's some hope in that DELC is focused on this. They've hired people to really focus on how the data goes. And there's also hope expressed with the revamp of the quarterly report that hubs have to do. If the quarterly report can actually be more of this kind of information that provides the larger picture of what's happening, that's going to benefit not only the system as a whole for us to understand, but it's going to benefit the council for being able to have a more accurate report from the hubs on what's happening in their regions. So that's kind of my summary from my notes. Did I leave anything off?
That was amazing, Peter. I think you hit all the marks.
All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, great comments. Great comments. Marie.
So I have a few notes from our discussion. Gabby, feel free to jump in. I think we had a quick review of the priorities. I don't know that there was enough time for our group to have taken a deep dive into the material before the meeting. But certainly discussion around how important the partnership is with our agency partners and how it's really that communication channel between decisions that happen at a higher level to those that are working on the ground, how important that is to make sure that communication happens and that information goes from a state to that local level in a way that really informs what's happening. One note that was important was there was such a priority emphasis from the Early Learning Council on workforce. That workforce has a very small mention in 2025, and so that was just an important call out. It is on there, but just again how important that workforce piece is. I know Gabby just sent us a couple of reports that were just completed, so just again that emphasis on the workforce is critical. And then we pivoted our conversation a little bit just to get some feedback from the group on if there's value in having Early Learning Council members attend these meetings on some sort of regular basis in order to be able to listen and ask questions, etc. And overwhelmingly, folks in our group said yes, that there would be value in that, especially as that leads to better advocacy. Knowledge always leads to better advocacy, and learning leads to better advocacy, which is something that's obviously high on the Early Learning Council priorities for 2025 as well. So Great discussion, appreciate the feedback. Gabby, if I missed anything, please help me.
Yeah, no, I think you got everything, Marie. Thank you.
Thanks, Marie. Once again, great comments. Yeah, so our group had a great discussion. I think one of the big takeaways for me was the suggestion, and everyone agreed with this, that council members attend virtually, probably in most cases, a governance board meeting of the hubs, and have this be a way of showing the importance that the council assigns to the hubs and their work, and also a way to make sure the governance boards understand that they are part of a much bigger picture, that there's a statewide focus here and it's cross-agency. So I thought that was a really exciting idea, and one that I'm guessing council members would welcome and would be relatively easy with Gabby's help to implement. Then we also talked about, there were questions about the statute changes that are coming up. And this is where Chris will have lots to tell us in a few minutes. But, you know, how can hubs really get a grasp on what's the impact of those changes going to be? What's the timing of the process, and how do they make sure that they get input into that process? Because we all know these are going to be significant rule changes. Fortunately, they're badly needed. So that's the good news, but it's going to be a big lift. Also, the comment that anything the council can do to help CCOs get more connected to hubs would be very valuable. And we've certainly heard that before. And I think we, the council, with those agency directors at the table, can help, I think, move that forward. I understand there's also going to be a bill dropped that's going to actually reinforce and mandate that CCOs need to be on hub boards. I think Rep. Noss is introducing that, is what I heard. Peter, you may know more about that.
That's my understanding, that it's adding early learning hubs to the CCO's list of required participations. Great.
So we will all want to make sure that we got that on our targets for advocating. And then on behavioral health, just, you know, looking for ways to try to put more funding into EIECSE and how that relates to Every Child Belongs, and how it relates to other specific implementation measures, I guess, like the pyramid model. And just one comment on that not being listed in the priority document. We just had to try to figure out how deep to go in the priorities versus how generalized to go. And because we stayed at a higher level rather than an implementation level, that's why it wasn't put in. But we know it's a critical part of that system. So, oh, and a final comment was to make sure that our agency partners understand that hubs are more than childcare and preschool, that they in fact understand there's a whole system that includes all of our agency partners if we're going to be successful. So did I miss anything from anyone want to add to that? Okay. So thoughts about where we go from here. I appreciate, I think it was Maria's group saying that having council members join these meetings can be helpful, could be helpful. I don't know if you want us here every month that you meet. You know, I come to your meetings anyway, but I usually don't have time on your agendas. But do you want us to show up again? Do you want to, you know, see do it every other month, or let Nancy sort of, with Maria, when she gets back, filter ideas about how frequent or what the agenda might be for us. And Peter and Marie, you may have reactions to this as well.
Well, I think it's very helpful to have as many conversations as possible, and for us to learn. That comment about knowledge makes better advocacy. So I just think, from at least from my perspective, hopefully hub directors invite us when they feel we can be useful to them in terms of partnering on something or learning something. And if there's something on the agenda that we see that we have particularly interested in it, if it's okay for us to show up and listen, as you said, Sue, not necessarily be on the agenda, but to actually listen to the discussion, that could be helpful.
I love that
Yeah,
idea. I think one way to just figure out the best step forward would be for Marie and I to just check in with all the hub directors during our usual monthly check-ins in January. I think it sounds great to be able to connect with you all every month, whether it's for 15 minutes or for a longer period. There's always something to talk about, especially with rules and all the changes that are happening in Hub World. So let's stay tuned on that, and we'll keep communicating and sharing, so that we can just get settled with a schedule going forward with our monthly meetings.
Okay, that would be great, Nancy. Marie?
Yeah, Sue, if I may add too, I know
Yeah.
that we provided the hubs with the Early Learning Council with our topics for the year. And so one, if there's a space where our participation in your monthly hub meetings is beneficial to learn, great, let us know. And I would say on the flip side of that too, as we go through the year and sort of are looking at both these priorities and others that we have on our agendas, which are always packed, but I think having, if there's a collective voice or some sort of topic that should be a part of our dialogue as well. I mean, I think we share some build staff or time from build, so where there's opportunity there, I think that's welcome.
Okay, thanks, Marie. Yep, good point. Good point. Okay, well, on behalf of the whole council and those who weren't here, we want to thank you for your time today, but more importantly, for the great work you're doing. We appreciate each of you a lot. And we'll turn it back to Nancy to turn it to Chris or whomever. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you so much, Chair Miller, Peter, Marie. This has been awesome. I will move things over to Joel Metlin, who's got an update on Delk leadership. Hi, Joel.
Hi everyone. Good to see you all. Joel Metlin, Deputy Director of Programs for Delk, and I will have small children screaming all around me. I'm at a school right now. We just had a couple of updates about staff that we want to make sure that you all know about. The first is regarding our Early Learning Programs Director position. Gwen has been in that position for a very long time, and she's going to be moving to a new position with us in more of a senior advisor role. And so for the interim for that director over our main programs, the Program Design and Administration Office, we have our very own Dorothy Spence, who's going to step into that interim Early Learning Programs Director role. And so that's very exciting, and I hope you all can congratulate Dorothy on that new role. And she'll be working with you all now another way, in a new way. And then the second update is that we were successful in our recruitment for a community systems director. So as a reminder, this was the position I came to you all about in the fall. That's over the hub coordinators, coordinate enrollment, maybe some other functions within Delk, and is really a key liaison between programs, professional learning, licensing, all those different parts of Delk with you all and other partners in community to make sure that our systems are working for everyone, and that the communication and sharing is happening at all times in all aspects. So the person who was selected, her name is Becky Griffin. send out some information about her when she starts, but the plan is to have her start on January 21st. That'll be her first day. I want to make sure that she can spend some time with you all, get to know you, and it's just a great thing that we now have more of a complete team here at Delk, and looking forward to getting Becky up to speed and having Dorothy in this new role. So, thanks, Nancy. If anyone has any questions, they can always send them our way.
Thanks, Joel. I'm just going to pause for a minute. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Then I am going to call on Chris to help me just share the latest update on Early Learning Hub rules. I have some slides, and I'm just going to run through these fairly quickly, and Chris is here to support with questions that may come up. So let me just share my slides. So I'll just make sure. So just to start us out, I think everybody here knows that, we've needed some rule changes for quite a while. The rulemaking process, the goal is to update, clarify, and make more robust the framework that we have for early learning hubs. We want the hubs, after these 10 years to really reflect our best practices, legislative mandates, and all of the operational administrative realities that we know is necessary to have rules underneath. So we're going to have a phased approach over the next couple of years with rules. So phase 1 is to provide clarity to some existing rules and to introduce new rules that will enhance administrative processes, accountability, and engagement. And then phase 2 is going to be new rules, additional new rules related to hub operation, fiscal, and systems coordination. And this is also an opportunity to clarify any phase 1 rules if that's needed.
And I just want to add too that you'll see, and Nancy will bring up that there's different rules that'll be covered in phase 1 and phase 2. There are statutory requirements of what the hub functions are. Just because we are doing a phased approach to rulemaking does not mean that the hubs aren't expected to meet those statutory requirements. It's just that we want to acknowledge that there's so much content to cover in the rule set, and that's been asked for help for the administration of the hubs and more direction from the Department of Early Learning and Care. And we wanted to do really deep engagement on each one of these rules. That's why we are splitting them into 2 phases to ensure that we can do that type of deep engagement on each one of the rules. Sorry, Nancy, I'll pass it.
No, that's a great clarification. Thanks, Chris. So for phase 1, this is where we've landed. We're going to update the following current rules: purpose and scope, definitions, hub functions. And then for KPI, we're going to repeal the rules that exist in a different division of rules and integrate them into this new 900 rule set.
And just a
So
little bit more on that is that the hubs are the only entities right now that are actually receiving funds to administer KPI, and because they're in different rule sets, both of them weren't being updated as needed to update that. And so in the integration with the early learning hub rule set, this will ensure that there's even more alignment between what the expectations are for KPI, and there are portions of the KPI rule set that will no longer be relevant that speak to the early literacy grant. So this just ensures more coordination and alignment with the early learning hub functions, and to ensure and clarify that the hub entities are the only ones actually doing the KPI work.
great, thank you. So those were the current rules that we are updating. And then the new rules that we're drafting include administration, backbone agency structure, allowable use of grant funds, hub governance structure, and data collection and reporting. So you can see that, you know, all of the engagement that's been occurring over the last year and a half with Build are really going to come to fruition here with rules and, of course, the grant agreement as well. Chris, do you want to share anything else?
No, I'm definitely, you covered it great.
Thank you. Okay, so phase 2, the only current rule that we'll be updating is the selection criteria for hub contracts. And then we'll be proposing 6 new rules around, you can see them here, funding allocations, development of a community plan, all the way down to family voice and communication. And here's a tentative timeline. We're going to be discussing the rules with you in the February hub monthly meeting on February 4th. That's an opportunity for DELC to hear feedback from hubs. We'll be presenting to the ELC in late March. The RAC meetings will occur in late April. We'll have a public hearing in May, and then the comment period ends at the end of May. The Early Learning Council votes on the final rules June 25th, and then phase 1 rules go into effect October 1, phase 2 rules go into effect July 1, 2026.
And there will be more engagement before phase 2. We just wanted to truncate the end of the timeline so you'll see the difference in the effective dates, just so you have time to engage with the rules and learn around what the administration and implementation of them will be and to adjust to that. We are working on the application for the Rulemaking Advisory Committee. It is likely that the Rule Advisory Committee will meet multiple times in April and May to cover all of the content and to ensure that we're really engaging with folks on the rules. We will have representation from the Early Learning Council on that RAC, as well as from hub directors and other representatives from the early learning system. And the hope is for those who want to apply to a RAC, the application will be open in February. It's not open yet. But we'll ask you to serve not only on this Rulemaking Advisory Committee for phase 1, but we'll also ask you back to be on the Rulemaking Advisory for phase 2. And this is just the legal component of the community engagement that we do as an agency, but we can do more engagement like through these meetings and through listening sessions on the rules as well.
Exactly. So, you know, what does hub director engagement look like? And, you know, we know that the year of engagement with Build is a big part of this. You'll be able to see a draft of the rules, like I said, in February. And then we'll have additional engagement opportunities as needed. And as Chris said, hub directors will be represented on the RAC, and the hub engagement will continue with Build meetings, and it's going to help us move forward with phase 2. And that's it. I'll stop sharing and see if there are any questions. Any thoughts or concerns?
Nancy, it's a curiosity. In the timeline, It's listed as July of 26 to align with the new grant agreements. Does that mean our grant agreements are going to move to that fiscal, or are we going to remain on the October to September timeline?
Carla, do you want to respond to that? I can give a quick answer.
Yeah, so the current thought process isn't 100% confirmed, but the current thought process is to, yes, adjust us to the July through June timeline to match up with most of the other grant agreements that exist at DELC. That being said, in order to also match up with this rule process, what we're considering is possibly doing two smaller, either having two smaller independent grants or having a grant and an amendment within a biennium, to kind of split it up so we can have the dates line themselves back up appropriately. So it won't affect anything dollars wise. The dollars will all stay the same. They might just look a little different. But I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that's going to look like. I'm hoping in the next month or two, I will have some very clear, this is what it will look like as well.
There's a lot of history on why we're in an October to September contract cycle. So I encourage you to look at that before making that decision.
Yes, we are working with leadership and with procurement and with accounting and budget. So there's a lot of things that I know have happened in the past, and now with us being DELC, there's also new things to consider on what's working and what isn't working. I know specifically for this upcoming cycle, a concern that I know has popped up before was about the timeliness of an agreement getting out the door. But for this, it would be right in the middle of the biennium. It actually would be the perfect time to do anything because everyone else already did their full 2-year agreement. Last year, it'll be in 25. So in summer of 26, when I'm messing around with stuff, I have no competition. So I'm feeling really excited about that part, and hoping that some alignment will help streamline some of the processes as well. But I know things were a little, I wasn't around for the entire part of it, but I know things were a little chaotic when it was procurement through ODE versus our procurement at DELC now as well. That's been established the last almost 2 years.
It was also connected not just with ODE, but the cycle of the legislative session. And that's something that you cannot overcome.
Yeah. And it affects it affects coordinated enrollment, which is also, it's a July through June, and then the hubs were the only one, I just say the only one across the board, but in this case, the only one that was on an off cycle. And with all of the other main agreements being on the same one, yeah, we just thought we would revisit what that looked like.
Well, I would assume that as you go through this process, Carla, that hubs will be able to provide some input or history or whatever. And Nancy, maybe you and Marie are the funnels for that. But there is so much history around this.
Right. I think that sounds like an opportunity to maybe have a sort of an office hours around this. It's coming to my mind for folks who want to share their understanding of how this has worked in the past. I think that would be really helpful. So kind of a note to self on that.
Yeah, and I'm guessing Carla and others would welcome that input just to avoid past challenges.
Any other input around contracts or anything with the timeline we have here? And Christy, I do want to thank you for sharing that. It's always helpful to have more context.
Yeah, of course. And I also just want to thank everyone in this room and in this meeting. It was really helpful to use all of the notes from the meetings that you had with Build and all of the input input that you've given over the last year of guidance that you need and more clear direction. Nancy, Marie, and I spent many hours together the last couple of weeks doing the first draft of these rules. So we will be really excited for you to be able to review and dig into the drafted rules in February and March. We are trying as best as we can to balance having clear direction written in the rules and guidance for hubs, for backbone agencies, and for the governance council, and also having that flexibility for your hub to be able to work and implement your core functions as you need to and as works for you. So it'll be exciting to really work through these drafts together. And thank you for your time.
So Nancy, one other comment I just want to throw out.
Yeah.
And Chris, sort of related to what you just said. So whether there's going to be a communication connection to the governance boards of the hubs as this whole rule change process unfolds, so that the governance boards also understand that, this is happening. And I don't know if you hub directors will want that kind of connection or how you're going to inform your boards about what's going on. But I think it'll be important that there's some kind of agreed upon communication link.
Does a hub director want to respond to that? My feeling is that you all are keeping your governance councils up to date on all things DELC and particularly the rules. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we're keeping our boards up to date. And it was also suggested in one of the DELC and BUILD meetings that they might host a call with hub directors and backbone organizations. And we suggested like the governance council chairs. So all of us were getting the same information at the same time. And this was specific to the upcoming rules changes.
That's right. Thank you, Christy.
We provided a couple of updates, but I think they will be beneficial if they can come. So for as long as we know the timeline and how to book the visits, happy to do it.
Thanks, Begonia.
And if hub directors have any idea of folks on their governance councils that might be interested in serving on the rulemaking advisory committee, that more formal rulemaking advisory committee, once the application is open and live, really welcome you to forward that to folks that you think would like to serve on the RAC.
Any other thoughts? We've got 3 minutes. Any other thoughts about rules? Anything else that we should be aware of as we move forward with the draft? I am really looking forward to February when we'll be able to get some really good feedback from you. Okay. Thank you again. Thank you, council members. Chris, thank you so much for providing all that great context. And I will, Brenda, be sending a recap email, if not today, then tomorrow. I wanted to remind you that we have a hub meeting exit survey. Marie and I really love to hear your feedback and how we can improve these meetings. So please take a minute to provide that. And another reminder that the KPI peer learning session is tomorrow at 9. We're keeping everybody busy. I hope you can make it. I think it's going to be a great session with Southern providing some just an amazing presentation on how they support infants and toddlers. Thank you all. This has been a great meeting. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.